A few years ago, the elders went away for a day to think about the church and what God was saying to us. And I think there may be one or two people who were there on that occasion, but I remember on one of the early on in the day, the question was asked of us: what do you want for St. Andrew's Baptist Church? What do you want for St. Andrew's Baptist Church? And there were different responses. There were people who said, I would love, the music to really help us to worship Jesus. I would love there to be good youth work. I would love the older people to really know that they are a part of the church, even if they can't attend. I would love us to get to know the Bible really well. I'd love us to be able to reach the whole town so that we can tell them about Jesus in a way that will make them want to meet him. And then there was one response. A response that, when it came to me, I thought, yes, this is what I want. And it's to behold the beauty of the Lord. What do we want for St. Andrew's Baptist? To behold the beauty of the Lord. And when I heard that response, I said, yes, I want to behold the beauty of the Lord. I want us, when we gather together, to behold the beauty of the Lord. Because it's so easy, isn't it? Sometimes we treat God a bit like a managing director. And it might be when we're reading our Bibles in the morning. It might be when we come to church. We sort of arrive like a sort of well-preferred secretary. And we arrive and we say, okay, God, what would you like me to do? What are your instructions for me? Okay, number one. And then you listen really, number two. And then you go away with a notebook full of instructions that will please God because you love him and you do want to serve him. But sometimes I wonder, do I ever actually just put the notebook aside for a moment, and even my pen, and just look at the beauty of God? Do I ever take time to dare to look at that beauty that will dazzle me, that might make me blind? To seek, as the psalmist said, one thing I ask of the Lord, this is what I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord. Behold is an old-fashioned word, isn't it? We hear it at Christmas with small angels saying, behold, I bring you news. But it's a beautiful word, because when you behold something, I don't know what you think, but you see it and you observe it because it's beautiful, because it's impressive, because you don't want to take your eyes off it, because it just fills you with wonder and awe, and you just want to keep looking. Behold the beauty of our God. I wonder, perhaps can you think of a time in your life when you have seen something that has completely wowed you? The sky this week, the red and the pinks were absolutely glorious. And you think, oh, this is beautiful, but I want more of it. Have you smelt a smell, perhaps when you've been walking past a bush and the smell suddenly hits you and you want to go and put your nose in the bush and never leave? Or perhaps that's just me. Do you ever have a conversation with a friend where you laugh and laugh and laugh and you tell stories and you talk about the stuff that really matters. And you think, I want this conversation to last forever. And I think there's something about that when we're touching the beauty of the Lord. And what it creates is a longing in us. I want more of it. I want this bush. I want to stay in this bush forever. I want to bite into this chocolate cake and never feel sick. I want to continue this conversation because we're going to places that really matter to me. The poet Malcolm Guite says this: "My sense that God is always present, shimmering behind the veil of things, and that he is calling us constantly through that veil to trust ourselves to him and seek his face. And that until we should look at the world through his eyes, allowing him to transform and renew our vision." Tonight, that is the invitation to us, the invitation that we say as we came. We want to behold the beauty of the Lord, because that God is just behind the surface. And there are many times when we feel we can't quite grasp him, but he's just there. In response to Psalm 27, Malcolm Guite, who's a wonderful poet, if you ever can find his books, do look at them. I realize it's a bit small, but fortunately I have the real thing. And this is his response to the psalm that we started our service with. "Oh, let me see with his eyes from now on, whose gaze on beauty makes it beautiful, who looks us into love and looks upon his whole creation with a merciful and loving eye. My heart has said of him, seek out his face. I've sensed his bountiful presence shimmering behind the dim veil of things. That presence calls me to tremble at the brink and rim of lived experience, and then to free myself of fear, to trust him, and to dive right off that brink into his mystery, into that deep and holy sea of love in which the living worlds all float and swim, to dare each moment's death that I might live." As we come together this evening, I wonder just for a moment, what is the one thing that you tonight would ask of the Lord? What is your desire? Sometimes God plants desires in our hearts to make us hungry for him and to seek him. We're going to, in a minute, look at a story from the Bible that talks about people coming into God's presence in stages. I want to give the context first. It is from a book called Exodus, which is the second book in the Bible, and it's very, very old. And so lots of things are quite different when you read Exodus from what our lives today, but there's some really important things about this text. To explain the context, God has saved his people from slavery. They were slaves in Egypt, and he's brought them out of Egypt, and Moses is their leader. And they've been going through the desert, and the journey should have been quite short to take them to this special land that God had for them. But actually, it's taking a while. God doesn't waste time, even when we take a while, and so he is shaping them to be his people. This people that are just a ragged group of people, and they've lived all over the place, and they've had strange experiences, but they need to know who their God is that they are following, and they need to know who they are, their identity and their purpose. And so for this, God makes a covenant with them. It's a bit of like a legal document, only he didn't have paper and lawyers. He just makes it between them and him. And it's where both sides, he and them, they make an agreement. And this will help them to understand what he is like, because it talks about God's character. And it will help them to understand what it is, how he wants them to live, how they will live out his love and his compassion and his truth as they walk through the desert, but also as they become God's people. And all this happens, the text that we're going to read happens at a mountain called Sinai. And we're going to hear what happens.
So we're reading from the book of Exodus, chapter 24, and starting at verse 1. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel. You are to worship at a distance, but Moses alone is to approach the Lord. The others must not come near, and the people may not come up with him." When Moses went and told the people all the Lord's words and laws, they responded with one voice, "Everything the Lord has said, we will do." Moses then wrote down everything the Lord had said. He got up early the next morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain and set up 12 stone pillars representing the 12 tribes of Israel. Then he sent young Israelite men, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed young bulls as fellowship offerings to the Lord. Moses took half of the blood and put it in bowls, and the other half he splashed against the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it to the people. They responded, "We will do everything the Lord has said. We will obey." Moses then took the blood, sprinkled it on the people and said, "This is the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words." Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel went up and saw the God of Israel. Under his feet was something like a pavement made of lapis lazuli, as bright blue as the sky. But God did not raise his hand against these leaders of the Israelites. They saw God, and they ate and drank. The Lord said to Moses, "Come up to me on the mountain and stay here, and I will give you the tablets of stone with the law and commandments I have written for their instruction." Then Moses set out with Joshua, his assistant, and Moses went up on the mountain of God. He said to the elders, "Wait here for us until we come back to you. Aaron and Hur are with you, and anyone involved in a dispute can go to them." When Moses went up on the mountain, the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord settled on Mount Sinai. For 6 days the cloud covered the mountain, and on the 7th day the Lord called to Moses from within the cloud. To the Israelites the glory of the Lord looked like a consuming fire on top of the mountain. Then Moses entered the cloud as he went up the mountain, And he stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights.
Thank you. There's a lot about this story that is a bit of a challenge to understand. But there's one thing I notice, and perhaps you did. There's an awful lot of going up mountains, high mountains. And this is repeated again and again and again. And there's this sort of idea that somehow God is at the top of the mountain. I wonder if you ever feel that you're at the bottom of the mountain and you're wanting to somehow get to God, but the mountain is quite steep. But the story that we read and the chapters before that Ian read, there's an awful lot about going up and down mountains. It makes you tired just reading it. And I think what the writer is trying to say is God is very distant for these people. So in Exodus 19, we have Moses, who is the leader. He goes up the mountain. Now, he's the one who goes up most. He goes up and down and up and down and up and down, because he's the person, he's the mediator, the man in the middle. The people have to stay at the bottom, and they're told you can't even touch the mountain, because if you touch the mountain, you'll die. But they see lightning, and they hear thunder, and there are clouds, and they're absolutely terrified. And God later gives the law while Moses is up in that mountain. And the chapter that we've read just now is the end of this covenant ceremony. And it began in verse 1, where God says to Moses, "Come up to the Lord. You are to worship at a distance. But Moses alone is to approach the Lord, and others must not come near." And the people are not to come up with him. Very much, God's up here and you're down here. What's the message, I wonder, that the people are getting about this God who is leading them? The story tells us that the people sacrifice at the foot of the mountain, and then the elders, I think there are about 70 of them, which is more than we have, thankfully. They go further up the mountain, and then Moses and Joshua go further still, and then Moses just goes to the very top of the mountain. There's all this toing and froing, and it's a bit hard to get your head around it. But then there's this remarkable 3 verses bang in the middle. Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel went up and saw the God of Israel. Under his feet was something like a pavement made of sapphire, as bright blue as the sky itself. But the Lord didn't raise his hands against the leaders of Israel, because they would have been terrified. They saw God, and they ate and drank. What happened? What happened on that occasion? First of all, they saw God. What did they see? What did God look like? How would they describe, what was it? There's something about blue pavement, but what was it? They saw God. What was that like? How did they feel? What did they think? Were they standing? Were they kneeling? Were they screaming? What was it? What did they see when they saw this God who is so distant, who's right up in the mountain and no one can go near? And then it says, what a strange thing, they saw God and they ate and drank, as you do. So what's that about? Can you picture the scene? So they've just seen God, and then they say, oh, well, we're here, let's have a picnic. What did they eat? Had they brought a picnic with them? Were David and Jane coming up with their bags behind them? What did they eat and what did they drink and why? Why do you eat and drink? Isn't it a strange thing to do to eat and drink when you've just seen God? That verse together, when you put it together, they saw God and they ate and drank. What do you make of that? It's a little verse that you can just, because you're getting on to the next bit and you're so busy thinking of sacrifices and who was up the mountain and who was down, but they saw God and they ate and drank. And we've talked today about beholding the beauty of the Lord. What does it mean? And isn't it strange to put those two things together? If you'd just seen the Lord, would you eat and drank? Would you say, oh, that's fine, now I'll just have my Mars bar? What's going on here? Unless the eye catch fire, God will not be seen. Unless the ear catch fire, God will not be heard. Unless the tongue catch fire, God will not be named. Unless the heart catch fire, God will not be loved. Unless the mind catch fire, God will not be known. I wonder this evening, as we think together about this amazing verse, they saw God. What does that mean to you tonight? And what I want to do is just give you some space and time to perhaps recall a time when you saw the beauty of the Lord. And all of us, because we're different, will be able to think of new things. But memory is a real gift. And perhaps there are experiences that you have had or times that you have had in a particular place with particular people where you think, yes, I saw the beauty of the Lord. And while the music is playing, let's just have time to try in your mind's eye to play that scene again and respond. Savor it like you do a sweet when you're enjoying the taste. Savor it and then respond in prayer to the God who you saw. We will hear some music playing, and then we're going to sing this song together at the end of that. But please, let's give time to try and remember the time that you saw God.